sister Jean and brother Ron joined Mom and Dad. Chuck and Gloria Dias in a much, much better place. I'm sure you all agree. I hope you've learned a great deal here today, because yesterday when I, 2 days to watch practice for the first time, I have to say I really enjoyed it. And the people who were presenting us before us were just terrific. Thank you for coming. We are definitely honored to be here. For Dad. If I'm not speaking loud enough, just give me a sign. I'll try to help. As most of you know, Chuck Dias really loves the movie business. His dad, it was never work. It was his hobby. It was fun for Dad to be there until 1 o'clock in the morning. Some of us kids didn't appreciate that because there was school the next day. But we were there anyway. Dad saw his first movie in 1914. And believe it or not, that started 74 years of love for the movie industry. He spent 55 of those years in Earlville. Dad started as a projectionist at the young age of 13 in Plano, Illinois. He met this dark-eyed, beautiful Romanian girl who later became his wife and our mother, Gloria Orr, and Dad always referred to her as Glory. Mom was the daughter of a Romanian, very strict Baptist minister. And as many of you know, many years ago, they frowned on movies. So Mom and Dad eloped in 1925 and were married a full year before they finally admitted to Grandpa that they were married. He did forgive them, but it wasn't until Dad became mayor of Earlville that he forgave them. In the early years of their marriage, Mom and Dad ran both the Plano theaters and the Mendota Theater. In 1932, they came to Earlville, moved here, and bought the Lyric Theater. During the first years of owning the Lyric, Mom opened a restaurant in town on Main Street. And during the early war years, early 40s through 45, Mom worked at the Sandwich Hospital as a nurse. Now, Dad had a couple of hobbies. One was taking movies, and the other was throwing special events. I'm sure some of you here will remember some of those events. I'll go through just a couple. World War II, the big thing was a scrap drive. So anyone who brought 5 pounds of steel to the movies got into the movies free. And by the way, if you wore your uniform, you came to the movies free. Dad really loved those men who served for us. In 1939, Dad brought the entire Wizard of Oz props, all of them, including the live animals, to Earlville. How many big theaters didn't get that? But Chuck Dias did. I remember Dad telling me this. I was a little young for this, but dime night was very big during the Depression years. Just like dollar night was very big for the drive-in theater when we opened that. Let me think, in 1952, how many of you were around? All right? Well, do you remember going to the football game, maybe the homecoming football game? And Dad was there with a 16mm camera, capturing Barbara Hale and her whole entourage during halftime at homecoming. That was a pretty big deal. In 1953, Dad held drawings for Schwinn bicycles. That was a pretty big deal. And some of you may remember Gary Wolf. Gary won one of those bicycles. Oh. You remember the Sunbeam bread? Sunbeam bread was pretty popular, and it was famous for the beautiful little girl who was on the wrapper. Dad held a Sunbeam bread look-alike contest. And much to my surprise, just a few years ago, I discovered that, where is she? Connie Miller was one of the contestants. Yeah, she's kind of related to me. All right. Many of you will recall Dad did serve as mayor 3 terms. The first 12 years was two terms of 1945 to 1953. His third term was from 1957 to 1961. Dad really enjoyed being mayor. And in fact, he was very proud of the fact he got $50 a year for being mayor of Earlville. And a jar or something. What he was most proud of being mayor was those people who were elected as aldermen and served with him. Probably his proudest moment was in 1946. They opened Marathon Electric, and that really helped Earlville. It increased our economy, gave us a lot of employment. It was great for us. Naturally, we're all sorry to have lost it. Dad's second hobby, as many of you know, if you've been uptown for the 150th headquarters, was 16mm movies. He loved to shoot any special event in and or around Earlville. He even shot Ronald Reagan up in Dixie in 1945. And we still have those books. Take time, if you haven't already, to go on up to the headquarters and see the movies of Dad talking not only about the industry, but Earlville. And yesterday, Jan and I brought another tape for them to add to their collection. I forgot my movie posters from the Lyric and the Theater in California. I apologize, but I will mail them out. So then we have some headquarters. Movies, probably I should add that my brother, as a professor at the university, his students actually put together Dad's footage from 1930 to 1956. And I got a kick out of watching it just last night.
I don't speak loud enough. You can also give me the full hand. Dad had the foresight to see the changing times, and in 1953 the family started building the drive-in theater. It opened in 1954, the Dyersburg Drive-In Theater, just west of Earlville. In fact, Tuesday will be the 59th anniversary of the drive-in theater. Opening day, there were more people watching them pull the screen tower up because they had built on the ground. I remember standing beside my mom, and with every creak of that tower as it was coming up, I was afraid she was going to have a heart attack and they were going to drop it. But there were more people to watch that than were at the movie theater. So many people worked either at the Lyric or the Drive-In Theater, and I wish I could name them all. If you know someone, or if you worked there, can I see?
Raise your hand. Who worked there? There's a few people.
Many young couples might remember parking in the back ramps and Dad checking on things with our German Shepherd pit, especially on steamed windows. But I won't ask you to raise your hand. Dad knew how many kids sneaked in. They'd either in the trunk of a car or around the fence. He rarely made them pay. He thought if they wanted to see the show that bad, they deserved to see it. You may remember we had an unusual family pet, Chippy the monkey. He used to be in the lilac bush out in front of the house, and when people would come by, Chippy would jump down on a branch and go, ah!
He was only that big. Stayed open. The Lyric Theater stayed open 2 years after we opened the drive-in theater, but as you know, television had hit even Earlville, and Mom sold the Lyric in 1956. Our mother, Lori, died in 1968. At that time, we really tried to convince Dad to retire, but he wouldn't hear of it. He wasn't about to give up his passion, his love for what he does. Dad later married Wilma Seward, who continued to work the drive-in theater and took care of Dad when he was ill. They were married for 17 years. Besides the 4 of us kids, probably there are very few of you here will remember, my mom and dad also raised 16 other children. Many of these children were either having problems with the law, or problems with their families, or they had had a child out of wedlock. A lot of these people showed up when my mother died in 1968. As you know, we worked hard at the garden. We loved what we did. But we learned a great deal. So what did we learn? The value of work. How to treat people.
The need for a positive attitude when everything was going wrong. I can remember when everything was falling apart, none of the cars would start, and Dad always made a joke out of it. And the glass was always half full, never half empty. Both Ron and John followed in Dad's footsteps. Ron teaching film, somebody do it right. TV at the university. John produced and distributed training and educational films. Jean, like Mom, was a caregiver and became a nurse. I want to mention now that Jean's husband, Gib, is here today. His daughter, their daughter, Gayleen, and son, Steve, and daughter-in-law, Becky. So raise your hands so they can hear you. So it was really nice. We had to go 4.5 hours to be here today with us. I did not become mayor like that, but I've made a career out of working for mayors and city councils. So he had that influence on me. Mom and Dad's love of working, both good people, has been a major influence in all of our lives. Thank you again for letting us share our parents with you, and thank you for your donations to ECHS. Thank you.
Jan? Jan?